Hello and welcome. My name is Kenny Ardwin and I'm the Adult Services Coordinator at Clapper.
I'm Nicky Davis and I'm the Adult Services Officer, and together we make up Clapper's Adult Service Delivery Team.
A very warm welcome to the very first Cleft Talk panel discussion brought to you by Clapper's Adult Service Delivery Team and proudly supported by the VTCT Foundation.
Cleft Talk is your opportunity to learn more about the topics that adults born with a cleft across the UK told us are important to them through the Adults Services and Roadshow.
We hope that you find these panel discussions both entertaining and informative. Remember that you can keep up with the Adult Services Project online, including watching this and other panel discussions again at www.clapper.com/Adult Services Project. You can also join the conversation on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/Clapper Adults.
Today on the programme we are discussing a topic that affects many adults from all walks of life across the UK, self-esteem. In our fast-paced, high-pressure world that we live in, many people struggle with self-esteem, perhaps without even realising it.
Therefore, today we hope to shed some light on this very common but very complex issue and give you some strategies to help recognise when you might be experiencing low self-esteem, as well as some ideas of things that may help, and point you in the direction of people who can help you with overcoming low self-esteem.
It is our pleasure to welcome our fabulous panel guests, Amanda Bates and Jen Rundle. Before we get into the discussion, can you please briefly tell us a bit about yourselves and your background?
Hi, I'm Jen Rundle. I'm a clinical psychologist and I currently work in the South Thames Cleft Service. I've been working here for about 2 years, and previously I worked in other physical health areas such as diabetes.
Hi, I'm Amanda Bates. Hi everyone. I work in health research and have a background in health psychology, but I'm here today as an adult with a cleft to talk about self-esteem.
Oh, brilliant. Well, welcome both of you.
Thank you.
Very warm welcome to you both. Now, Jen, I'd like to start with you with this panel discussion.
Sure.
We hear a lot discussed in the media nowadays about the value of high self-esteem and the negative implications of low self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
But can you start by telling us what self-esteem actually is?
Yeah, sure. So self-esteem essentially is how someone views themselves and the kind of value one places on oneself or measure of worth they place on themselves. Usually, if that value is negative, then that obviously equals low self-esteem. That's when it becomes a problem. People that have low self-esteem will often use words to describe themselves that are negative, such as maybe failure, not good enough, inadequate, worthless, even ugly, flawed. And it's important to note that everybody has those thoughts about themselves from time to time. Everybody uses those words to describe themselves sometimes, but it becomes a problem if you are doing it really frequently and it persists. So people that have low self-esteem tend to have really lasting and deep-seated negative views about themselves, and they also tend to see that view as very much an absolute truth or a fact rather than just an opinion.
Absolutely, and I'm sure as we're about to discover today, these are thought processes that, as you say, a lot of people have, and they can become quite destructive, and it can be hard to recognise that that's what we're experiencing.
Okay, Amanda, your turn now. What are some of the things that impact our self-esteem in both positive and negative ways?
I think the things that I'm about to mention are kind of two sides of the same coin. So our self-esteem can be affected by the relationships that we have with our friends and family, a significant other as well. Work, I think, and this is what I mean by two sides of the same coin, because these can happen it can give us high self-esteem or low self-esteem. It can be other things, so obviously if we are bullied, if we are discriminated against and experience prejudice and stigma, that is going to have a real, or potentially have a real impact on our self-esteem. Other things such as money worries, housing worries, you know, the everyday issues that can become very big and very distressing in a very short period of time. Or we are able to manage them as well. And I think it's really important that this discussion kind of, as Jen has already said, really kind of normalises problems with self-esteem, because we all have them from time to time, absolutely. But as Jen said, it's as if it becomes overwhelming and regular, and we have this internal dialogue that is constantly telling us that we're a failure, that we're rubbish, that we're worthless. And really thinking about strategies to counteract that as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think as well, it can be something really, really small as well with self-esteem. So it could be even something like, an example, maybe like if you walk in the office and, you know, no one says to you, oh, how are you? You know, that can, I think that can even like affect your self-esteem, because it's like, oh God, you get all them things again, like I'm worthless, I'm not, you know, that you don't really feel that valued as well. So yeah, no, 100%.
And of course, you know, someone's appearance and body image generally, that can really affect our self-esteem, especially when we are bombarded with images of so-called perfection. It's very, very difficult, and I think it's increasingly difficult in today's society, particularly with social media and things like that.
Certainly, and I think we'll get into a lot of that later about sort of the role that, you know, the media and social media have on our self-esteem, because it's exactly as you say, you know, that we see lots of different images portrayed, many of which are not a particularly accurate depiction of how people live their lives, but nevertheless that's the comparison that we're all comparing ourselves to, and it's quite unattainable, I think,
Completely
in
unattainable.
most cases.
Absolutely.
Now, of course, a lot of our conversation so far has kind of been under the assumption that someone recognises that they may be suffering from low self-esteem. Of course, in reality, we know that's very often not the case, and it can be very difficult to pick up. Jen, I'd like to come to you for this next one. What are some signs that we might be experiencing low self-esteem in ourselves?
So, I suppose it's a really, as I've mentioned, sort of a real kind of persistent nagging sense that you're not good enough, sort of a sense of self-doubt that sort of starts to creep into every different aspect of life. I mean, you can have sort of global self-esteem about everything in life, every aspect of life, but you can also have low self-esteem in relation to kind of one single aspect of life. So it might be that you are really lacking in self-esteem at work, for example, and the rest of your life you feel okay. But I suppose it's the fact that it's just, very, very, very pervasive, very sort of just very, very difficult to dismiss, and I suppose if you notice it's having an impact on your kind of behaviour. So, for example, you might be avoiding situations that you would otherwise go to, or start to withdraw yourself, become inactive. Stop doing all of the things that you might do when you're feeling okay about yourself. And I think what Amanda mentioned about that internal kind of dialogue or monologue, I think that's quite a good visualization of what it's like, that kind of persistent sort of critic that's always nagging and saying really hurtful, negative, almost bullying things. Often in therapy we talk about an internal bully, and it being a kind of a voice that is really hard to dismiss or get rid of. So I think having that all the time, or a lot in one aspect of your life, withdrawing, but also it could lead on to kind of larger or more substantive mood difficulties. So you might notice yourself feeling depressed, low, anxious, panicky, and you might notice it coming out in other ways, such as feeling very angry or irritable, and that might become apparent in your relationships with other people, for example. I think those are the main things I would say. I don't know if you've got any others.
Just a couple of other things.
Yeah.
I think you've absolutely covered them really well.
Yeah.
I think if someone obviously is often very tearful, if they feel unable to make decisions, and just can't assert themselves, which we all have every now and then, trouble with asserting ourselves. But if that is a regular, frequent pattern, then I think that's very difficult. And it's almost a sense of that they don't believe that you deserve happiness. Always this monologue. I'm worth this. I don't deserve this. But also, and as you say, it can lead to social withdrawal, and I think it can lead to kind of hostility in relationships as well, because you put up so many barriers. Because you've got this constant fear. You don't want to try anything new as well. You don't ever really want to challenge yourself. And I think really fundamentally, you cannot show yourself any kindness and compassion.
And I think one of the really interesting things as well with self-esteem is, exactly that point that you both made really about being, your own toughest critic. And, you mentioned the concept of the self-bully as well. And you just mentioned there about not being able to show yourself kindness and compassion. And, that's not to say that you don't have this in you, because probably outwardly to everybody else, you are demonstrating this kindness and compassion, but it's respecting yourself enough, isn't it, to show it to yourself, which is far easier said than done.
Absolutely. I think often it can be easier to show it to other people. And in fact, that's what, from my experience working with people with low self-esteem, that's really apparent, that they find it quite easy to be kind to their friends and family, but actually trying to direct that at themselves is really difficult.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is another one for Jen. So often we talk about self-esteem and our perceptions of ourselves. We talk in terms of internal and external influences. Can you discuss the difference between these and whether there is one that's more important than the other to improve our well-being?
Yeah, so I suppose we've sort of touched on this already, really. I think the main difference is that the internal influence is your own sort of perception of yourself, your own kind of internal inner voice telling you whether you're a kind of good or bad person. And the external influences are quite literally that, what other people are telling us, or how or external events that happen. So I would argue that it's the internal influences really that are most important, since no matter how much we try, we can't change those external influences. You can't change how people react to you. Mostly else. I don't know if you've ever had experience where you can, but I don't think you can really. It's unpredictable. It's uncontrollable. So what's important is how you interpret and perceive and deal with the outside world and those external influences, and that's what we mean when we talk about trying to be kind and compassionate to yourself, and maybe challenge some of those really negative self-evaluations. I think what people with low self-esteem can be sort of trapped in is what we call in therapy kind of cognitive distortion, so seeing things through quite a negative lens. And what we try and do is try and make people aware of that, and try and sort of be aware of, well, am I seeing this external event through a sort of filtered lens, a negative filtered lens, and is there a different way of looking at it? Is there a kind of more compassionate way of looking at the external situation, and then acting on that? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that really does. Yeah, no, that was really interesting.
And yeah, I completely concur with Jen about how it's so important, I think, to cope or manage the internal influences around self-esteem, because it's so easy, I think, for all of us to hook our self-esteem solely onto external factors. So whether that might be a relationship, whether it might be work, whether it might be a sport. And the problem with doing that, as Jen said, if you've still got this internal self-esteem that is saying, yes, but you're worthless, but you're rubbish, unfortunately, it makes those external factors very, very vulnerable. So if any of those were to come to an end, you're not really left with very much that's a kind of like core stability. Whereas if you can build, develop, and maintain a positive, healthy sense of self-esteem within yourself, you're kind of almost developing a kind of resilience against those external potential hard knocks in life. You know, you learn to weather the storm. It doesn't mean, of course, that you find everything joyous all of a sudden, because you don't. But it just means that you have a lot more within you and a lot more resource to navigate the external challenges, I think.
Absolutely, and I think as well, even with some of the external stuff, it's not even necessarily that someone's doing something or saying something nasty to you.
No.
It can simply be the absence of positive reinforcers all the time, which people's opinion of you hasn't changed. But I think when you hinge a lot off that external validation, and so maybe you go through a day where you just have a fairly normal day and haven't done anything particularly remarkable, but you're still your good, decent self, but perhaps people aren't saying it as much as if you've done something particularly special that day. But having that internal resilience, as you both said, to be able to go, you know what, I did a good job today, and I did X, Y, and Z. It's really super important. And I'd like to come back to you, Amanda, for this next question, which is I think the one thing that we often do when we're struggling with our self-esteem is comparing ourselves to others, as we've sort of touched on a bit already. And we can also make assumptions, I think, quite easily that seemingly happy-go-lucky, friendly, bubbly, outgoing people around us have got it all made, and that they're happy with a high sense of self-esteem. But realistically, how widespread are self-esteem issues generally in society?
I think they're incredibly widespread in our society and globally as well. I think this is a global issue, and I think it's very sad, but as you say, we're kind of recognising it and talking about it. But I think it's really easy, and again, images on social media, celebrity culture, to think, wow, they're really attractive, they're bubbly, they've got money, they've got everything, they must have a really, really high self-esteem. But as we've already talked about, it's very dangerous just to hook things solely onto external factors. So, and of course there will be people with high self-esteem who do have a lot going for them. But for me, if someone has a lot going for them, that has everything to do with who they are as a person, and their kind of soul and how they deal with things and their character. And to me, that makes somebody much more attractive and rich in their characteristics than anything else. But I think there are, as I say, a lot of unrealistic images out there which are unhealthy and damaging. And I think we all need to take responsibility in how we think about changing society, to be honest, because a lot of us, I won't say us four here, but a lot of people, we do buy into these things at some level, otherwise magazines wouldn't sell. So it's what we're doing to kind of perpetuate and to reinforce this culture that we all need to kind of think about and take responsibility for.
Absolutely, and just to pick up on that, I think a lot of it is very implicit, isn't it? It's very subtle, and we don't necessarily realise that we're making the sorts of assumptions that we do. Because I mean, I'll be the first to admit I catch myself out sometimes. With I thought you might see an image on social media and get a little bit envious of of someone for whatever reason. You know,
Yeah.
maybe they're on a far-flung beach somewhere,
Yeah.
you know, drinking a pina colada or whatever, and you would make assumptions about their general well-being and their general satisfaction in life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And of course, on social media, as we well know, everyone's putting their
Their
sort of
best,
best foot
yeah.
forward.
Their best self.
Yeah,
Of course.
yeah.
Of course.
You've got to remember that filter is
Yes.
always there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know what you think, Amanda, but I feel like there's a slight glimmer of change in the air in terms of social media. Like, I think there is, maybe it's slow and slight, but it's something we've been talking about as just within our psychology team, that there are slowly some signs that there's been a bit of a backlash, I think, to this idea of perfectionism, and there's quite a lot of advertising campaigns that are really promoting diversity and acceptance and body positive images. I mean, I certainly agree there needs to be a lot more, but at least some of the big brands are starting to recognise, I think, that selling this idea of perfection is not what people really want and is not healthy.
I absolutely agree, and I would say certainly, in recent years, there have been. So I think when I was travelling up on the tube today, there's a lot of the Dove billboards.
The Dove's really
and like
taking that
hashtag
message.
show me, I think.
Yeah.
But you know, encouraging people to upload images of just themselves, just everyday regular people, who are size 0 and incredibly objectively attractive. And that's great, and I think this concept of individuality and promoting that, and as you say, promoting diversity is definitely coming through, but much more needs to be done. But certainly when I was growing up, that was never around, diverse images. So I think it's very difficult as well if you are perhaps slightly older like me and you've not had those images to, you know, as a kid when you are growing up and having to, you know, really influential development around your self-esteem and all those sorts of things, you haven't had those reference points. So just something to think about, really.
Certainly lots to ponder there. And you know, lots of good change happening, as you say, but it all takes time, doesn't it?
It does, and to really filter through, absolutely right.
There's also this, I think I saw on Instagram the other day, there's this thing going around where there's like all these no makeup selfies as well. I think that's like the new like trend for it, where there's a lot of like a lot of women doing all these like no makeup things, and I think that is quite positive as well, because obviously there is a face under all that makeup. Like sometimes, especially I think for young people as well, they always feel like, and I feel like they're getting younger as well these days, like where they're putting more foundation on to cover their face. I mean, I probably started only wearing makeup when I was about 15. I didn't even know what mascara was at all when I was growing up. So I feel like it is getting a lot more kind of younger, where girls want to grow up faster as well, whereas I think it should be more, you just kind of be yourself, don't worry about, you know, having orange, you know, things on your face. So I think that is quite positive as well, whereas, you know, just stay young, just be fresh, be you, don't put all this, like, I used to call it like slap on or something, slap on. But it's
good.
So this one's for you, Jen.
Okay.
So there will be some people watching and listening to this who may be concerned about other people in their life, given how hard it is to recognise for ourselves when we're struggling with our self-esteem. What are some of the signs to look out for in other people which may indicate that someone is having a difficult time?
It can be difficult. I suppose you're, because of my answer to the other question about signs in yourself, obviously a lot, as we talked about, a lot of the symptoms are sort of quite internal, you know, they don't necessarily show themselves. You might be able to show yourself as being really confident on the face of it, but actually internally there's a lot of criticism and negative beliefs going on. But I would say, as an outsider, you're really looking, I suppose, for any kind of change of behaviour that might alert you that something's not quite right. You might notice somebody, again, sort of withdrawing from things, not perhaps replying to texts, not answering the phone, not wanting to meet up, or saying no to different social engagements. you might hear them be critical or dismissive of themselves more than they would normally, or not. If you compliment them, they may say, "Oh, don't be silly," or just dismiss the compliment, not be able to take it. What else? I suppose, any sort of sign of low mood or depression, being very tearful, maybe not caring about themselves, so a lack of self-care. If there's somebody that does, usually present themselves in a certain way, and you notice that they're not, dressing the same way or looking after themselves in the same way, or perhaps even, not eating properly, not sleeping properly, very tired, lethargic, easily irritable. I think I mentioned that in the other question. Maybe short-tempered. Those are sort of signs of other mood difficulties, but could also be a sign of self-esteem as well. Low self-esteem. I think those are probably the main ones. I don't know if you can think of any more, London, but those are the ones that I would say. So I suppose it's change in their behaviour, or how they talk about themselves.
Yeah, because I think there's also as well, like some people, I think it's also quite good to realise that it's okay to not be okay. So everyone has moody days as well, don't they? Everyone goes into work and feel, oh God, I don't want to be here. Or, when it's raining outside, it's just like, oh, this is the last place I want to be at work and stuff. So I think I feel like if it's just like the odd day, then I think it is still okay to feel like that and to maybe feel a bit down in the dumps. But if it is like every single day, for maybe like a long time, then I think you do need to.
If it goes on a bit longer than what you would say, it's just a bad day or a bad couple of days. What I've got to say as well is if you notice somebody maybe self-medicating, like with alcohol or substance abuse, that can be another sort of sign that kind of goes along with the lack of self-care, really. But that's something that's, I suppose, quite an obvious sign to look out for.
So many different things really to keep in the back of our minds. I think, but nice to be aware of the things to look out for, not only in ourselves but in people around us as well. And I think one of the more common misconceptions really with low self-esteem is that, and you touched on it before, about people who appear really confident and really outgoing couldn't possibly struggle from time to time with self-esteem. And I know that there'll be some people watching this who will think we're not a very relatable panel to them, perhaps, simply because we're sitting in front of the camera having a discussion. But the reality really is, I think as we've already covered, is that self-esteem can take a tumble for anyone really at any time. And I was hoping that we could each give an example of a time where we've personally struggled with our self-esteem. I'll start with you, Amanda.
Yeah,
that's okay.
sure. So I'll offer a couple actually, if I may. So the first big one for me was certainly as a teenager and being very ostracised at school by people who I thought were my friends. So my self-esteem took an absolute dive. And it took me, I would say, about 4 or 5 years to really come up again from that. But I would say the thread of that, I think for quite some time afterwards it would still affect my friendships, or somebody didn't respond to a text really quickly. I would go straight back sometimes to being that 12-year-old girl. Thankfully I feel like I've put all that to bed now, but that took a long time and it wasn't anything that I was able to deal with overnight, and I needed a lot of support and understanding around that. And then the second thing, I guess, has been not so recent now, but certainly as I started to get into my working life, what I realised I was doing, although I didn't realise for quite a while, was putting all my self-esteem into my work. And that's a dangerous thing to do as well, because then as soon as something slightly doesn't go right at work, which is just normal, that's what happens to all of us, we don't always have great working days, then I would feel really bad, like unnecessarily, and think I'm rubbish, I can't do this, I'm going to get fired, and I'd very quickly go to this really very difficult place. And it was only when I started to realise what I was doing and kind of talk to people about that and recognise it that I was able to slowly figure it out and step back and start to reevaluate my self-esteem. And it's always going to be much more healthy when it's spread across different things in your life. But as we've talked about, the internal nugget, if you like, that is so important to build. But yes, so I think for me they're my main two examples. So
That's actually very relatable, I think, to a lot of people, those for sure.
Yeah.
How do you, Jen?
So I think mine would also be the most sort of recent one I can think of is work related as well. When I finished training, I mean, to get onto clinical psychology training is very competitive in itself, but then it's also quite competitive to get a job afterwards.
Cool.
And I went through a lot of interviews before I got this job. It wasn't like I just easily walked in, and I got a lot of rejections, and I actually found that really, really difficult, because I've never seen myself as, I'm not, even though, like you said, Kenny, people might think I'm confident, but I'm not super confident, and I was not really super confident in my abilities. Just out of training, you're sort of fresh out of training, you think, oh, maybe I'm not going to be a very good clinical psychologist, maybe I'm not clever enough, maybe I'm not...
sort of imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
exactly
yes.
that. And so you have all of those self-doubts already, and then when you go to interviews, and I think loads of people can relate to this, but of course if you then get rejected, that compounds and adds evidence to all of those negative beliefs. So I found that really tough to deal with, just to build myself back up. But I suppose I just had, we'll come on to this, but I just had to keep reminding myself that it didn't mean that I wasn't a good clinical psychologist. There were lots of other reasons that I may not have got the job, and just persist and keep going. And then I got lovely jobs I really love. And I remember getting this job that the interviewer said, how well I did and how well I came across, and I remember on the phone sort of getting the feedback going, really, you sure? I've got told so many times that I don't interview well and that I'm not very articulate and that I waffle, and then she was like, no, you came across really well. And it just, it was such a kind of wake-up call to be like, oh, okay, I am okay, I can do it. But there was definitely a few months where it was really difficult. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's such a common one, and that's sort of looking for a job and getting rejection letter after rejection letter. But I think they're absolutely right. You're interviewing very well today, very articulate on our panel. So I think St. Thomas's is lucky to have you. How about you, Nicky?
So I think with my example, so I always tend to relate or compare myself with other people, especially people my age. So I'm 26, and when I see, like, say, I don't know, like friends, for instance, when they in a really good job, they earn more money than me, or they're really high up, they're like manager role, and I think I always compare myself, because I always think, oh God, I'm nowhere near that, or I'm not good enough to ever be at that position, and that's when I start feeling a bit like I'm not worthy, and everything, and all the emotions as well. But I think really everyone has different kind of experiences in life, so, and it just takes people longer, so I eventually will get there, but it may just take me a little bit longer, and everyone's different sectors as well. Like it takes, the charity sector was, some of my friends in the corporate world. So I think I've got to keep remembering myself that they're doing a completely different job to me, and they may have not had the experiences that I've got. So I went travelling a little bit before, which I took 6 months out of work, whereas they might have had that experience, and they might do it later in life. So everyone goes through different stages, don't they? So I think that's what I've got to keep reminding myself as well, that it's okay if you're not you know, if your whole working career doesn't go like really fast paced, you don't get to like CEO in the next year or something like that. So yeah, I think that's what I've got to kind of like try and remember, because I do especially like compare myself to a lot of other people, whereas my life's like completely different as well.
That's right, and has lots of positives in its own way, and experiences that they won't get, simply because no two lives are the same really. And I think that comparisons one's a really good one. So I think we're all guilty of doing that. My one would be, I compare myself to a lot of my friend group who are the marriages are starting now, and it's like feeling that you're a little bit behind in that. But then you look at other aspects of your life, like your career or whatever, and it's like, well, actually, I'm doing different things to them. We're at different, we're kind of moving in the same direction but on slightly different ladders, if that makes sense. But I think it's so easy to get to really pigeonhole yourself into seeing a deficit in one of those areas, and thinking that it's much more important to your overall sense of self-worth than actually it is. Rather, it's one thing. And like, okay, you might be a little bit behind over here, but actually you're doing really well over here and over here as well. But I can totally see how you get caught in that.
You get fixated on one.
It's like the whole, I think at the end of the day, like the only races we have to really run is always with ourselves, but it is with ourselves, I think. But it is just so easy to look around. But hard to navigate, but we all do it, as you say.
Absolutely.
So this is a question for both of you. So in your professional or personal experience, what impact do you think being born with a cleft and perhaps looking different or sounding different can have on people's self-esteem and confidence?
Go?
Yeah.
So, in my experience, it can certainly have an impact on self-esteem, but I suppose I wanted to make the point that it's definitely not the case that all people that have visible difference or speech difficulties have low self-esteem, and I think sometimes that is a bit of a misconception or a myth. In fact, the research shows that the kind of objective degree of visible difference does definitely not match up to the subjective degree of distress. So objectively, from a surgeon's point of view or an external point of view, it might not look like you have any visible difference, but that doesn't matter, because to the person that's coming in the room, they may feel themselves, they may perceive that they have a very, they look very different. So I suppose, I just wanted to make that point really in terms of the research, and that makes our jobs really kind of interesting in that respect, because we can never ever assume. But I suppose, where it does have an impact, I think it can have an impact in all sorts of ways, in terms of, I suppose, mainly those kind of, it can make those interactions with other people more difficult, and perhaps make it more likely that the person may experience negative interactions, such as bullying, harassment, or just perceive that people are interacting negatively. So, they may experience people looking or staring or saying comments that are that they perceive as negative, when they could be that people are looking or staring, but because they're curious or because they just haven't seen somebody looked like that before. So that can make those scenarios more likely. I suppose that's probably the main way I think it can impact. I don't know if that's what's similar to what you were going to say, Amanda, or...
No, that definitely all resonates with me, and I'm really pleased you brought up about the research that objectively how we look has no relation to how we might feel about ourselves. But equally, that's not to say that people don't have valid concerns as well. You know, when we are in a society that portrays body perfection and appearance in a certain way, there are challenges for sure. And I very clearly remember, was it English A-level, maybe English GCSE, it's a long time ago now, but we all had to take turns in reading out a page from a book that we were studying, and I used to absolutely dread that, because I was thinking, well, am I going to be understood in what I'm saying? And actually, it was always fine, and I never thought at that age I would then become someone who ends up giving lectures and talks, and you know, that was inconceivable. You know, so life can really change as well, but sometimes you have to feel the fear and do it anyway. I think, and just don't always, and it is hard to do, but don't always think that the world is out to stare at you, to be difficult around you, because you know what, most people are pretty lovely, in my experience, and yes, if people stare, you know, that is often just real curiosity. I mean, there is a cut-off point to that as well, where it just becomes really rude, but what I find in situations like that, I always try and smile, which isn't always easy to do, and if I'm having a bad day, I'm like, whatever, you know. But if you try and smile, they'll often smile back, and then automatically you've just broken down that barrier, and I think that can be really powerful as well. It makes you feel better in the interaction as well. So just thinking about how you might address some of those things as well. But so not everyone has concerns, but equally it is understandable why some people do.
Yeah, definitely. I can actually relate to the reading the page out.
Yeah, I think a lot of people
do it all the time.
Did you?
Yeah.
And did you find yourself trying to figure out where you'd be, which page you'd have to read
like
from?
flipping through. Yeah.
Why do they make us do it? Because you don't take it in, because you're just panicking trying to work out which page you're
and
reading.
I just think of going bright red as well.
Yes.
I absolutely hate
Yes.
it, and I always know when I'm about to do it. And I really hate it, and I always think, oh my god, I know, like, even if I'm having a conversation with someone, I can feel it, like, I can feel like tomato face coming on, and I'm like, oh my god, no. And then I'm thinking, oh god, like, they probably think I'm really this, like, really timid girl, and all of this, when really they probably don't even care about it. They just, like, talk to you like normal, and it is this kind of, like, these thoughts going through your head, like, oh my god, I can feel myself doing this, I look really stupid right now.
And that's what I mean about the, like, distortions, the filters, the, like, the mind reading that you do. You assume, oh yeah, they're definitely thinking this, and this about me, which really can catch you out.
No, definitely.
And I think with that, you know, the fear of it only makes it worse as well. And, you know, it's a self-fulfilling.
It as well,
Absolutely.
You know, thinking that you're the only person that it happens to.
Everyone
is so worried that it's happened to them that no one could possibly be paying attention to what's happening to you. You know? But I think as well, just to pick up on the point that both of you have made about the research, picking up that, you know, that distortion between. You know, we make an assumption that, you know, just because someone's objectively more... See, I'm going red now.
You're not.
You're not when you think you are.
I feel a heat in my head. But no, because we think objectively that, you know, someone's appearance might be perhaps more severe than somebody else's, that their overall adjustment must be also worse, and like our evidence as well from our study has shown that not to be the case as well, and I think on the flip side of that though as well, we can lose track of people who we might think, well, you know, what have you got to, you know, have a concern about? And I've heard lots of you know, I've had lots of people speak to me you know, through my work, and asking how to support family members and things, and they say very well-intentioned phrases like, you know, I just don't see it, you know, their appearance isn't a problem, it's all that sort of thing, and I think it's really kind, it's really well-intentioned, but I think it can also be a little bit dismissive actually for that person who, in their mind, it's very real, and this sort of sense of low self-esteem is definitely a thing. And you know, one thing that came up a lot in the adult survey was that people's self-esteem was low because they'd experienced negative interactions in the past. And we've spoken about some of them, bullying in school, being harassed in the public, perhaps even abuse from romantic partners, sort of the whole gamut of different experiences were represented in those surveys, and generally across life, if you were to take, I think, the general population as well on this one. So my question for you both really is, how do you build your own sense of self back up again after you've had it pulled down, particularly by others?
Not easy. But I think, Joe and I have both spoken about kind of internal monologue that can take us over. I think a lot of it is learning how to challenge that. So when you start hearing these kind of negative voices, you kind of almost have to stop yourself. No, hang on a minute, and that's when you have the dialogue within yourself, saying, oh, actually, I'm okay. Stop there, stop right there. I'm okay. I have friends, I have family, I am loved. But also it's about learning, it probably sounds a bit cliche, but kind of learning to love yourself. That is not easy to do. Is what if you have been feeling really awful about yourself, I think sometimes it's hard to start talking about these issues. I think it can be very useful, for example, to write down how you're feeling as a start, those sorts of things. As we talked about, it's very easy to compare ourselves to others, so trying to think about, well, what's going on right for me right now? What's important in my life? What has meaning for me in my life? Thinking about things that make you feel fulfilled and nurtured. We've talked about self-care, and I think that is a really important one. When you're trying to build yourself back up, those things like making sure you're getting enough sleep, that you're eating well, get out into nature as well, breathe in that air, see that there is a world out there. It can be very easy to become trapped within ourselves and trapped within this monologue and dialogue. Take a breath, get out there, experience, like just go for a walk in your local park or meet up with a friend for a coffee, immerse yourself in a good book. Think about all these things that make yourself feel better, and always celebrate the wins. And I'm not talking about getting that promotion or, just that you had a really nice time with a friend at the cinema, just anything like that. Or you really enjoyed a family occasion, or you cooked a new recipe and you went really well. Just those little small steps. None of us can conquer Everest overnight, and it really does take a long time, I think, to almost retrain ourselves and start shift that monologue to really learn that you are a good person and that you are worthy of love, and that it's all about self-compassion. I think so.
You said a lot of exactly what I was going to say. I think that the self-compassion is really an important one, and something that we try to, I suppose, teach people, really, because it is a skill.
It is.
I like your phrase retraining, because it is a bit of sort of untraining how you're unlearning how your brain sometimes can automatically go to the negative filter, and trying to retrain it to see things in a more positive light and with a more positive lens on it. I think your point about recognising the wins and the positives is something to really encourage people to do, because I've even done it, when you're starting to feel a bit rubbish about yourself, just even kind of writing down, like I say, writing them down actually, and putting it in front of you so it's in black and white, and you can't you can't argue with it. Can be really helpful. Even looking at your CV can sometimes be useful if you're somebody that has a CV or that's worked in different areas. You can list your achievements right there. That's in black and white. Okay, that's all of the things that I've done. Look at what I have achieved. I clearly am not a useless, worthless person because I've got all of those things written down. Asking other people as well, what they like about you can be really useful. I think doing things like, I've had some patients keep really like nice cards and things like that
Yeah.
that people have given them, or letters,
Definitely.
or texts, or emails in this day and age. Try and sometimes keep those, keep them locked away, or print them out and put them in a little box, or save them on your phone or something, and just bring them out whenever you're feeling a bit rubbish, because we all definitely have those days. But building up that sort of, we call it in therapy like a positive data log, so a log or a journal, or basically a log about all the positive qualities that you have, and the skills you have, and the achievements that you've done in your life. But I think it's really important. And what you said about self-care, absolutely. I also think one thing to add in about self-care is that thing about saying no to other people sometimes, and give, like I think you mentioned, boundaries, and making sure that you do make time to give yourself, because I think one trap you can get into if you have a bit of low self-esteem, or a day when you're feeling a bit negative about yourself, is to try and people please, and try and say yes to everything, and do above and beyond for everybody, to help everyone and be that person. And that obviously is can be detrimental to your own self and emotional well-being. And I think also, about just to touch on the social media as well, that is something that, yes, I know that the amount of kind of media generally that you're exposed to, you can't control, but in terms of your own feed, in terms of your own Instagram or your Facebook feed, you can have control over that. So if you're looking at someone, following someone that doesn't make you feel good, don't follow them anymore. I think I've been doing that a lot recently. There's certain celebrities that I follow that I think, why am I this? Every time I look at their Insta video, I just think, I don't look like that person. So just don't follow them anymore. And we can all just, it's a weird thing, isn't it, that we sort of have this compulsion to follow these people, and then you start to realise, actually, this isn't really doing my self-esteem any good. So try and find those people, those role models that have that inspiring, empowering message of body confidence, or appearance confidence, or just are realistic, authentic, genuine people that you can relate to and that make you feel good. So I would say that is something that in this day and age that we need to try and learn to do a lot more. And I suppose, in general, in sort of your own social network as well, apply the same thing. If you're friends with someone, or maybe not friends, or acquaintances with somebody that doesn't make you feel good and that isn't supportive, you don't have to have them in your life. Try and surround yourself by people that are good and helpful and compassionate and kind. I think that's a big one as well.
I completely agree, and I think if you are experiencing low self-esteem, it can be easy to get into negative relationships. So part of the building yourself back up is being able to let those negative relationships go, and just recognise that they're not good for you. And that's not easy either. But again, it's getting the right support to let some of those things go, because those things can be utterly life-changing. And surrounding yourself with people who show you that compassion and humanity, and that they are true friends, and that there's nothing superficial, and that you're kind of all in it together, really, this crazy thing that we call life, I really liked your, what do you call it, is it a data log?
Positive data log.
So I remember having a jar where I would write down notes, so this is going back some years now, but if someone paid me a compliment or said something really nice, I'd scribble it down, I'd fold it up, and I'd put it in the jar. And then if I was having a really bad day, I'd just pick them out and sit there and read them. And it was so nice to have that physicality as well, actually. And as you say, you see it in black and white. So I really like that, and I think it can really work. Because you do forget those things.
Absolutely. Well, we're all guilty of that, aren't you?
You kind of filter out the good stuff, and you just say, oh, but do you remember when this happened? That's the overriding thought in your head, but no, have that data log. Yes.
Definitely, and I couldn't agree more with surrounding yourself by the people, with the people who make you feel good. And going back to your very first point, Amanda, about you deserve that as a person, and recognising that you deserve to be around people who, show you as much respect as you show to them as well.
And that you learn to show yourself that amount of respect.
That's right, and who you can be yourself with as well, I think is ever so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, this is a question for Jen, but I think you've answered it anyway about the social media, which is really, really interesting. And how, I think, Amanda, you said as well, how we're all so wrapped up in the social media, and how, where we see all these, pretty people and thin people on the media, and we can get so caught up with it, especially with Instagram and stuff. And I think what you said was, how do we tell ourselves that we are enough is just to take yourself out from that and unfollow the people and just have a look and see your life and think, this is what I've got, this is what I've achieved as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just being able to, like I think you said it earlier, Amanda, just stop, kind of being able to check in with yourself every now and again. And almost have this kind of meta self that looks down on you and goes, actually maybe that's not helpful what you're doing right now. I think just that can and having a social media break. I mean, more and more people do. More and more people do it, and I've actually I haven't done it, and I keep feeling like I need to do it. Even when I go on holiday, I think I'm not going to look at my phone, and then it'll last like a day.
And it's so easy to do it.
But I know colleagues and friends that are starting to do it more and more, and do find it actually really helpful just to reset and reconnect with the real world.
I think you both actually really answered that question really well.
Good old social media detox. And I think we've spoken as well about the importance, I think, of having good relationships with people around you. The fact that most people are good people, is something I wholeheartedly agree with. I really do feel that most people are good people, and if you've got those friends and family around you who you can just be yourself and be honest with and say, look, I'm having a hard time right now, it's so important. And so I kind of want to turn that question around a little bit and go, if one of your friends or family members or colleagues or neighbours or whoever really comes to you and expresses that they're having a hard time with their self-esteem or even generally more with their mental health overall, how do you, and obviously as an untrained person but well-intentioned, how would you respond to that and support them?
Yeah, go for it.
I think it's really important to make sure you've got time and space set aside without any distractions, so it's giving that person as much time as they need, but let them lead the conversation. So you respond to where they're at, so they can say as little or as much as they'd like to, really, and that is completely within their control. Because I've certainly been in situations where, again, very well-intentioned people, but they're bombarding me with questions, and I'm just thinking, I'm not there, I'm not ready to answer all those questions yet, and I just want to be able to be myself with this problem that's going on, and be still with that, and I need you to support me just by being there and not asking lots of questions, not obviously checking the phone, not saying, well, I've got half an hour, can we hurry this along? But also that you're not trying to second guess someone as well, or trying to diagnose them. And I think that can happen a lot, actually. And especially when we do know a lot more about mental health is out there a lot, but not all of us are trained in that area, so not thinking, oh, well, I know what this is, not assuming that you know what's going on for them. But that you can offer, I think it's fine to offer, to say, would you like me to help you seek some further support with this? Should we look into that together? So seeing it as a joint venture without taking over and without trying to control the situation, because that could be really disempowering for somebody who is obviously not feeling in a very empowered place as it is. And just acknowledge that probably even for them to start to talk to you about how they're feeling is a really, really big thing. But it's a very precious thing that you want to hold their trust. and you want to hold their support. So you've just got to be so gentle and sensitive, I think. So it's just giving, both of you that time and space, really. But also, as a friend or a family member, it's about knowing your limits as well.
Yeah.
As I say, we're not all trained, and just being really mindful that if somebody is telling you something really quite significant, if they are, for example, self-harming, something like that, I think the right thing to do would be to try and support them to get further help. So knowing your own limits around that as well.
Yeah, you said exactly what I was going to say about the time and space, and making sure that you acknowledge, that you listen, but you don't overpromise that you can completely solve the problem. I think just literally asking that question after you've listened and saying, well, okay, this sounds really hard. What can we do about this together? What is helpful for us to do right now? Coming up with a little bit of a plan can be really containing, not only for that other person, but for you as well, because then at least you've got kind of a bit of a sense of, okay, this is how we're going to move forward with this. If you just leave it, then you probably will both leave feeling quite uneasy. So just saying, well, what can we do together? Would it be helpful to, like you say, look online to see what other support is available? Shall we go to your doctor together? Shall I help you make an appointment? Giving yourself a plan and a task or something to do, can just be really helpful, I think, in that after that first time that you've spoken about it, they've spoken about it.
So definitely, because I guess someone who is coming to you with problems is very likely to be feeling a lot of emotional turmoil. So as you say, trying to contain that and right, okay, what's next? We don't have to think about the bigger picture. We just have to think about the next step.
Exactly.
We do now.
Exactly.
Definitely. And as you both said, just taking that time to really listen, because it may be the thing that other people haven't taken.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So I think both of you may have answered the next question as well, but I'm just going to put it out there anyway, and if you do want to add it any more, then please do. So this one's again for you, Amanda, but feel free to chip in as well. So of course, sometimes there's only so much we can do on our own. Life can be hard at times, and no one should have to struggle through these things alone. How would you recommend reaching out to friends and family to say, look, I'm having a hard time right now?
I think everyone's different in how they want to approach this, and not everyone is going to feel able to simply say to somebody else, I'm having a really hard time. That might be the hardest thing to say. So some people might wish to just write a card. You don't. Not everything has to be talked about. That very first step, and as we talked about, often this stuff is taking those little baby steps. It could just be writing a simple note. It could be just jotting down a text. It could be saying, can we go for a walk? Can we set aside some time? And if you don't feel able in that walk or in that cafe to say it, that's okay too. Like you might just slowly be building up to that. Reaching out can feel very, very difficult because I think part of it, you can kind of almost perhaps feel like you're acknowledging where you're really at as well. By telling someone else, it's kind of really making it real. So if you don't feel able to have that conversation, start it a different way. Start the conversation in a different way.
It's almost like a pride thing as well, isn't it? It's like, because obviously if you say that, then you feel vulnerable as well, don't you? It's like, because you're thinking, kind of pulling back the layers as well, aren't you? Because everyone puts on this like brave face every single time, so it's someone really going deep into them emotions, and then you having to talk about it as well. It's kind of like bringing up them like demons again as well, isn't it, in a way?
It's quite exposing.
Yes, definitely,
And I was just going to add to that, to say, it doesn't necessarily even have to be a friend or a family member. There are loads and loads of great charities out there that you could go to if you felt like actually, I don't know if I can quite mention this to somebody that I know. If you want it to be like a completely sort of neutral person, there's great charities like Mind. If you just go on the NHS website, there's actually, I was just looking at it, there's a great page on self-esteem and where to get help to signpost you. Go to your GP, talking to the Samaritans there to talk about anything. It doesn't have to be self-harm, suicidality, it can be anything. So yeah, there's loads out there online if you don't want to necessarily reach to it.
Yeah.
Definitely, and do utilise those support networks that are out there as well, because they're there for exactly that reason. Look, this has been a fantastic discussion. We are very much nearly out of time, but I just want to ask finally, because as we've been mentioning, friends and family can be a great support. There are some great charities out there. There's also the NHS Cleft teams as well, who do some excellent work, funny enough, in this exact area. And so I was wondering if you could just briefly tell us about the services that the Cleft team offer in terms of supporting emotional well-being, and how people are best to get in touch with their Cleft team if they'd like to see more guys.
So psychologists are now embedded within every Cleft team. So if you have a Cleft, if you're somebody that's experienced a Cleft, then you can have access to our support. You don't even have to be necessarily under the service for any other reason. The majority of our referrals will come through the surgeon seeing a patient for a reason, like they would like some sort of surgery or speech therapy, for example. But you can access us just if you want to just see the psychologist. The way to do that is to go to the GP and ask them for a referral. If you're already under a Cleft team, then you can just speak to anybody. You can call the Cleft team, just call the receptionist and ask to speak to the psychologist. As I say, there is a psychologist in every Cleft team now. Different amounts of different areas, but most are fairly well resourced. We're quite lucky. Or you can just ask the receptionist to speak to the psychologist, or ask them for their number. They usually have a direct number or an email address. Or you can probably find details online for most. I don't know if I think our direct numbers are on the website for the South Thames Cleft service, and you might be able to find psychologists from other services as well online. How else? So another option is if you are coming in for an appointment anyway, if you're coming in for an appointment with the MDT, the multidisciplinary team, then there will always be, in our service, this is not true of everyone, I have to remember that, but in our service there will always be a psychologist sat in that team. But in other services, you would just have to ask somebody if you can speak to the psychologist. And either they'll be able to see you there and then on the same day after your appointment, or they'll get in contact and speak to you about coming in a separate time. So we're lucky to be able to offer a great deal of flexibility with how we support people. So we can support people either, as I said, alongside their other clinic appointments, or we can do it separately, either face-to-face, over the phone. Because all of the services are kind of cover wide geographical regions, then a lot of psychologists now embedded within Cleft teams use Skype or WhatsApp phone calls to offer support. And if we speak to you and think that actually we're not the right people, then we can always signpost on. So we will either be able to offer you direct support or be able to find the right person who can.
Definitely,
I hope that answers that.
It certainly does, and I would strongly recommend people do if they feel that psychology could be something that could help them to get in touch. And you can, if you're not sure where your nearest Cleft team is, you can check out the link that's on the screen now as well. And that is just about all we've got time for.
That's all we've got time for on the panel discussion this month. We hope that you found the discussion to be useful and interesting.
And of course, remember that you can access more information and listen again to this and other panel discussions on our website at www.clapper.com/adult services project.
If this discussion has made you wish to seek support, please contact your GP and request a referral to the Cleft team. You also find the details of your local Cleft team on our website.
And I think we would both like to sincerely thank both of our panellists for an amazing discussion today. Thank you both, Amanda Bates and Jen Rundle, for joining us on the discussion. As well as a big thank you to you at home for joining us as well, or on the train, or wherever you're listening. And yeah.
Make sure to join us next month where we'll be in Scotland discussing genetics and decision making when it comes to having children.
And we will have you know, an extra microphone between us next time.
Yeah.
So we'll be having to pass it around quite so much. So thank you all for bearing with us there. But until then, we will see you in Scotland. Take care. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. We want to know what you thought of the programme so that we can make it even better for the next one.
So go ahead and give the video a podcast a like. And if you're watching the video, comment below and let us know what you think. If this was interesting, make sure you subscribe to our podcast and videos.
Our next podcast video is coming up at the end of the month. So check out www.papa.com/panel discussions to find out what we'll be talking about next. You can also watch this and other panel discussions again on our website.
We want your questions to take to the panel. There's a panel discussion page on our website to submit your questions.
You can also check out everything we're up to with the Adult Services Project, including a list of our upcoming programmes and events at www.papa.com/Adult Services Project.
And make sure to also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.
Bye!